outdoor Wisconsin.
Until recently, Peter Allen taught ecology and systems theory at UW-Madison, but he decided to put his knowledge into practice, so now he and his wife Maureen are managing their 200-acre farm in Richland County for ecological diversity. In a sense, they're recreating a savanna landscape once maintained by mastodons, a landscape of oak groves and lush grasslands, and one that can produce an abundance and variety of food. We've come out to Mastodon Valley Farm near Viola, Wisconsin today, and I'm talking with Peter Allen, who is turning this place into really a sustainable agriculture project. Peter, tell us a little bit about your project here.
Yeah, so this is our farm, Mastodon Valley Farm. We've got about 220 acres here. When we first bought the property, it was conventionally grazed and conventionally cropped. And our goal is to restore the native ecosystems that were once here for long periods of time in the past. So I was a restoration ecologist at the University of Wisconsin, and the kind of typical way you restore landscapes is to sort of pick out the species that you think belong there, the natives, and the ones that don't belong there, the ones that aren't necessarily native. And that doesn't always work very well on a large scale. And when we've got massive ecological degradation across the planet, we need to have ecological restoration strategies that can scale. And so our strategy here is to restore our native oak savannas in a way that is economically viable. So we run a farm here that sells meat, primarily beef, pork, lamb, and poultry. And we rotate our animals in ways that mimic the way that the megafauna and the large animals that all went extinct 12,000 years ago, but that were here for 30 million years, eating the vegetation here, maintaining open savanna landscapes. When they all went extinct, the forests grew up, and now we've got to tame the forest by bringing animals back in, and we do that in a way that is both restoring the native vegetation, but also providing a livelihood for our family.
Now behind us is a cabin you built. You and your wife live there.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep, so when we were looking for land, we had a choice. We could either buy a smaller piece of land that had a house and a barn and infrastructure already present, or we could buy a little bit more land without anything. And so we kind of chose that latter option. We built a tent our first year here and then lived there, and while we built this cabin, we cut down a bunch of the pine trees and milled them out and built a little post and beam cabin. So we're off-grid, solar array that gives us a little bit of electricity, and then rainwater collection for our water.
Well, let's have a little tour of your farm if you don't mind.
Okay, let's go check it out.
Well, Peter, what's going on here?
So this is the spot where we overwintered our sheep last year. So, you know, we'd bring them a bale of hay every couple of days, and this really built up, 6 inches of solid waste hay.
Yeah.
And it covers the ground, it keeps oxygen out, it holds water in. It's not great situation, it needs to be cleaned up. So we brought the pigs in, and so we had 12 pigs in here for 2 weeks, and they just churned it up. They picked up the hay, they got into the mud and wallowed around, and they kind of evenly mixed the hay into the underlying soil. And now it's completely open, so now we can come in and seed. I think we're going to do sweet corn here for our family. So this will be our sweet corn patch. It's well fertilized, and now it's got a nice mulch layer, so there won't be any weeds. So it'll just be perfect sweet corn patch.
That's great. It looks like you tilled it.
Yep.
Pigs are natural tillers then, I guess.
Their noses are shaped exactly like a moldboard plow.
Well, Peter, these guys look as happy as pigs in mud.
They sure are. And it being midday and pretty warm, they enjoy getting cool by digging a little spot in the ground and getting down where it's nice and wet and cool. They flip their water over to make a little wallow and lay down. And we're actually using them here to prep ground for where we're going to plant corn. So these guys eat corn and wheat and soybeans as a feed ration to supplement the pasture. And that's fairly expensive. So in the last few years, we've been experimenting with growing some of our own grains. And so what we do is we feed cows hay bales out here. And you can see where the hay bales on the ground kind of scattered out, and they're kind of suppressing the sod. And then we bring the pigs in and churn it all up, mix it up kind of like where we were just at. And then we'll come in and I'll broadcast corn seed right on the ground. And then what I'll do is I'll yell and call the cows over. and have them run back and forth across here. I'll have them chase me with a bucket of grain. I'll go back and forth, and they'll go back and forth, and they'll push all those seeds right into the ground. And we did it for the first time last year, and it worked beautifully, and we got just a beautiful crop of corn. So that was on about a 1/4 acre. We're doing a full acre here this year, and that will be feed for these pigs then in the late summer. On this fence line here, we have the hillside coming down. On the uphill side has always been pasture. On the downhill side, this field has always been cropped. Up until just a couple years ago, they did tobacco way back in the 1800s, then wheat, and then corn up until recently. And you can see how it drops off 3 feet just on the other side of that fence. And that is all the soil that has washed off every time they've plowed and cultivated, and then it rains and the soil washes away. So when we got here, this soil was in really, really bad shape. It hardly grew anything, and there was no topsoil left. It was all just sand subsoil. So we immediately brought the animals in, fed some hay. We planted about 30 different species of native prairie grasses and flowers, and then a bunch of trees in rows. And then we ran chickens through here behind them. And now, just 2 years later, this is some of the best forage we have on the farm, right where we ran the chickens through. And by rapidly moving animals through quickly, we can start to rebuild that soil. Anywhere from 1/4 to 1 inch of soil per year, we can build back up. So my goal is to bury this fence before I die.
Now these old trees, they've been here a while, haven't they?
These are ancient trees, old growth, upwards of 200 years or plus. They're open grown trees, so they grew out in the sunlight, not in a closed forest. Trees in a forest grow straight up to get to the light. When it's open grown and there's grass around them, they grow out. And so you see these limbs that are outstretched. Sometimes these oaks can have limbs 30 feet out in either direction, 60-foot diameter around the crown. And when they grow widespread like this, they actually produce upwards of 20 to 30 times more nuts than trees growing in a forest, because they get so much more light.
Peter, this is really lush, and a lot of plants I admittedly don't recognize.
This is the area that we planted, with native prairie grasses and flowers, right when we took it out of corn. So it was in corn, we took it out, and we immediately planted about 25 species of grasses and flowers, and then we planted about a dozen species of trees, about 2,000 trees totals in rows on contour through the field. And between what we planted and what's come in naturally, we've got over 120 species of plants in this field right now.
So you're grazing this, right?
Absolutely. So like I said, we planted these rows of trees every 30 feet or so through this field. And so now we graze the alleys between them with all of this lush vegetation here. One of these alleys is about a half an acre, and it's about 2 to 3 days worth of food for them. And we've got them moving through each alley every couple days, and we're keeping them in with this electro net here.
Peter, you're doing a lot with this farm, but why did you choose this particular property?
Well, we looked at a lot of properties. We spent 2 years looking. We looked at over 100 properties in this area. We really like this area in particular around the Kickapoo River, so we kind of zoomed in here. But we basically had 3 main criteria. We had homestead. We knew we were going to build a house, so we had to have a good spot to build a house. I had to have a good house site. The number 2 criteria was it had to be farmable. We wanted to make our living on the land, so we had to be able to graze cattle. You need to have some grass ready to go because we already had cattle. I need to have some fencing ready to go. And then the other big criteria as an ecologist, I wanted to have as many sort of representative ecosystem types in the driftless area here in one property. So when I first found this property, the fact that it's got clay soil, ridge top fields, it's got steep slopes on facing every direction, it's got nice fertile valley pastures, it's got a spring, a pond, a trout stream, a wetland. Literally every major ecosystem type in this whole region is represented within just 100 acres right here. So it really gives us a chance to test strategies in different places for doing this kind of restoration work in an agricultural way.
And why are you doing all this? I mean, you could have a nice
I could be a professor right now.
Teaching job at a university. Sure.
Yeah. This is a lot more fun. And I like being outside.